Welcome to the tutorial Adding Effects in Animate, the first tutorial in the Effects video tutorial series. So in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to add an effect in Animate and not Animate Pro. Throughout this entire video series I'm going to toggle back and forth between Animate and Animate Pro because effects are added differently in both softwares. And in case you want to follow along with this tutorial, you can always reuse the sample material from Pack 14. So to add an effect in Animate, you could go to the timeline and click on this plus button here with the little black triangle. And then from the menu you could select Effect and your desired effect. So in this case I'm going to select the blur effect. So the blur effect is automatically added to the bottom of the layer stack in the timeline. So I'm going to grab it and drag it to the top of the stack. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach the punching bag, both its peg and its drawing element, to the effect layer. And I do this by grabbing it and then dragging it above the layer and then dropping it. And you can tell that it now is hooked to the blur effect layer because it's indented, and you can see the indentation by this black bracket here and the fact that it's staggered and no longer flush with the other arrows that you see here for the blur and the Karate Master. So to preview this effect, you have to do two things. First of all, you have to change some of the parameters for the blur effect. So to do this, you have to double click on the blur effect layer to bring up its layer properties, and then you have to change one of its parameters. In this case, we're going to change the radius. We're going to give it a radius of, say, let's say 6.5, and then close the layer properties box. Then what we have to do is click on this blue flower icon here to go into render mode. And as you can see, the punching bag is now blurred out. So the difference between the render view and the OpenGL view is that the render view actually renders obviously the effects, but this takes a bit of time and it's hard to work and play back a preview in this mode because the software is working very hard to render each frame with all the anti-aliasing and all the full effects. So for the most part, we work in the OpenGL view, and this is really just to preview once in a while to make sure everything looks good. You can actually render a full preview by clicking on this button here. And this will render you a preview with all the effects and all the anti-aliasing without doing a large final render from your scene. So as you can see here, a player window is opening up, and it's just a little bit slow the first time because it's loading all the frames. But now you can actually play this version to see this effect, to see the camera move, to see the anti-aliasing. So the last thing I just wanted to mention, I'm not going to show you how to do it, but I'll refer you to the user guide if you want to learn how to do it, is that you can save effects and the parameters that you've changed for those effects in your library. For example, if you know you're going to use a blur with a radius of 6.5 often at, like, say, high quality, you can save that effect in your library and then use that effect like a template and use it again and again. I mean, with the blur, there's only 2 or 3 parameters, so it's not that extensive, but there are some effects with many, many parameters that you might refine, and then instead of having to reset those parameters every time you use it, you can just reuse a template that you've saved in your library. The last thing I wanted to mention, which I should have mentioned maybe earlier as I was showing you that you could add effects from this plus button, is that there's a second way to add effects, and it's good to know that it's there just in case. You can go to the top menu and select Insert Effects, and also add effects this way through the top menu. So it's good to know there's like a redundancy there. So that's it for the tutorial, Adding Effects in Animate. Stay tuned for the next tutorial, Adding Effects in Animate Pro.